how did you first get involved in real estate? What are your core beliefs when trying to keep rents fair and low? Looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine? Hello everyone, welcome to the Boulos Beat. I'm today's guest host, Nate Stevens, partner and broker at the Boulos Company. And today we are welcoming a good client and friend of mine, Bill Stauffer. So Bill, thank you very much
Thanks
for
for
joining
having
us.
me.
Definitely. So a little background, Bill is principal of Storrey Industries, which owns and operates commercial and residential property in the greater Portland area, but also across the country, maybe we could technically say.
Well, yeah, I guess just Seattle a little bit.
Yeah, there you go. So, however, he's not just a real estate guy. He's the executive vice president and co-founder of Storrey LED Lighting, based here in Portland. And he's co-founder of Storytime Uniforms, which sold in 2010, and has extensive experience in offshore manufacturing, importing, and inventory management. So, true Renaissance guy. He's also a writer, involved in several great nonprofits, such as Freedom Story, Oceanside Conservation Trust, and Mechanics Hall. I think I have all of them. And he lives in Scarborough with his wife Ann and 2 daughters, and spends summers on Casco Bay on Little Diamond Island, and which is how I know Bill, what, maybe 20 years ago? Is that when?
19 years now we've been out there, yeah.
Wow.
Not quite as long as your family. But.
Yeah, and we definitely leave it out on the ocean in terms of the annual regatta at Little Diamond Island, and Bill does have the bragging rights of beating me in a regatta a couple years ago with a boat half the size. So
I didn't know that, actually. That's good to know. Okay.
You could take the shortcuts.
Well,
yeah,
that's true. Okay.
So you graduated from Colby College
Yeah.
with a Bachelor of Arts in East Asia Studies.
Yeah.
And what I think is awesome is you received your Master of Fine Arts in Creative Writing just a couple years ago from University of Southern Maine.
Yeah.
Like you didn't have enough on your plate.
It was a midlife crisis then. It's either the fancy car or the MFA, right?
So that's what drove you basically to get your master's is more time.
Yeah.
What else would you say that you do that I didn't mention to kind of keep your mind off, Story and your real estate holdings?
Well, like you, I love to sail. So this year, whether it was a good time or a bad time, I finally upgraded from the sunfish to a little bit larger day sailor. So yeah, I've been out on that a ton this year so far. So that definitely that's my happy place.
Yeah. And your nonprofit involvements as well.
Yeah. Mechanics Hall is somewhat new for me, and what I like about that relationship, I'm still learning a lot about the history of mechanics. What I like about it is the blend of the buildings and the history of the buildings with the literature component. That great library they have there.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So that's been kind of interesting. Freedom Story, been a lot involved with for almost a decade now.
Yeah, you can give us a little background on that.
Yeah, so the Freedom Story is based in California, but they operate in Thailand, and their work is preventing kids from being trafficked into prostitution.
Yeah. And
they've done some great work. They in the area where they operate, they've taken the dropout rate from 50% down to 6 to 8%. So they're just doing a great job, and they do it on a small budget and things like that. And Oceanside Conservation, you know about those guys. They try to put as much land on the islands in Casco Bay into conservation as we can. So
yeah, wonderful organization.
Yeah.
And so you're a New Englander, right?
am,
Massachusetts, born and raised. So what brought you to Maine? Was it Colby College?
We used to summer up here a lot up on Penobscot Bay.
Right.
So my grandparents had a place in Searsport, and we would spend a lot of time up there, really where I learned how to sail. Then went to I think I went to Colby because of that, kind of fell in love with the area and met my wife there, and we always knew eventually we wanted to end up back here.
And so how did you first get involved in real estate? Kind of what was your first building or your first involvement?
Yeah, good question. So my first boss, I worked for I got into sales at this uniform company, and I was working in Seattle. They were based in Oregon. He kind of mentored me on it, maybe not enough, at least initially. But I bought a 2-unit in Seattle. It was a really nice little piece of property. and had fruit trees and just a nice piece of property. And it's funny because I raised the rent like $25, and the woman who had been living in the nicer of the 2 units got real upset by that. She kept writing me long notes, and the whole thing kind of scared me away. I ended up selling the property
Jeez.
18 months later
Yeah.
at a loss, and thought I would never get back into real estate. But then I found another opportunity, actually out there for
Yeah.
a 4-unit, and got back into it with a little bit more backbone.
Yep.
And so that was the first. And I wish I held on to that because, it's in a great area in Seattle, and
Yeah.
I would have had a good return on it. But
That's one of our later questions.
yeah, there you go.
So how old were you when you first purchased that?
Oh, geez, I think 23, 24, something like that. Yeah.
And is that kind of how you built up to more and more properties, and then you eventually moved to the Portland area? Is that you just started buying more and more and building equity and leveraging that?
Pretty much, yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah. So the property in Seattle, we did end up selling and buying another one out there, but then we moved back here, as you know, and that's when started purchasing properties here. Started with the multifamilies,
Yeah. Any quick, hard lessons learned early?
Yeah, don't, if you know you have a good property, don't let a tenant bully you. But I think one of the early lessons was I didn't have a good vendor base in place. So, that just made things harder when things did go wrong.
Right.
So I think.
And these are having the contractors you can call any time of day and know that they'll be honest. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, understanding that property isn't necessarily a passive investment. I guess if you hire the right manager, it can be a passive investment.
Right.
But otherwise, it's a business, and you can't just buy it and walk away.
Right.
In my opinion. So.
Well, no, I mean, that's one thing I want to touch on is you're a very hands-on landlord, more than most landlords that I know. I mean, helping tenants hang things in their offices or replacing sewer pipes in the basement.
Yeah.
Is that just something that interests you, or you like to have that involvement, that physical involvement in your properties?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, I do still hope for the day when I can turn it all over to a good management company.
Yep.
But I think part of it is responsiveness and not letting those problems fester, because for any given property, that just turns to more problems down the road. So.
Yep.
I like to be in touch with the property as much as I can, play a role in it, help tenants as best I can.
And you also have great relationships with all your tenants.
Yeah,
as well.
I mean, I don't want to take away from anything else you want to talk about, but I do believe that tenants are my customers. So I know there's always that, a lot of people look at landlord-tenant relationship as contentious. I think that's overplayed a little bit. I think in Portland there's a lot of good landlords who have really good relationships with their tenants. But I got to make them happy. If I make them happy, they're going to want to stay in the building. They'll refer people to it, and that typically leads to buildings with lower vacancy rates. So.
I know you frequent a lot of the retail and restaurant tenants that you have in your
Absolutely,
buildings as well.
I want to support. I mean, I definitely want, especially in this time, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important to support my existing tenant base. And, so I do what I can, for sure.
So what's been your favorite building, or a building you're most proud of out of all the buildings you've owned?
Yeah, that's a good question. This might not surprise you. I think probably 22 Monument.
That's a building you acquired just a couple years ago.
Yeah, a couple years ago, and as you know, you have some family history in that one. But I think just being able to be more involved in restoring that building a little bit.
Yeah.
As you know, we redid the lobby. We redid 3 floors.
Yeah, looks amazing now.
And so just bringing it back to some of the original look and bones was a lot of fun. And seeing people's reaction to it when they come in and just being like, wow, you really did a nice job here.
Yeah.
And certainly it kind of played to a philosophy of, if you build it right, people will come.
Definitely.
because you guys really filled that up pretty quickly once. I mean,
Yeah.
we had 3 vacant floors.
It was a matter of just under a year, I think, that we had it all taken care of. Yeah.
So I would give you guys, Boulos, plenty of credit for that, but also, I think you advised us too. Through that process, and hey, if you redo this lobby, if people's first impression when they walk in is a pleasant one, then they're going to have a better feeling as they go up, look at the specific space they're looking at.
And also, where the market was trending, and there was definitely a demand for that type of, wood floors and high ceilings, and so taking out those drop ceilings and getting there. There were great bones, obviously, already with that building. It had been taken care of, definitely, but capitalizing on that, I think paid off, definitely.
Absolutely.
So, what about your least favorite?
Least favorite
property? You don't have to answer this question if you don't.
Yeah, no. I mean, I definitely, as you know, I definitely love the historic buildings because, there's, hundreds of stories inside those walls, and so that's kind of a neat thing to think about. Like your great-great-grandfather,
great-great-grandfather,
great-great-grandfather, and when you talk about going through a building and seeing his initials on a floor, and so that kind of thing, just imagining the past and what might have gone on in some of those buildings. But I can answer my least favorite is probably the 4-unit in Seattle that I used to own and was in a tough area. And it wasn't that it was a tough area, just like I alluded to, the supply base we didn't have in place at the time, so it just made everything more difficult. And it started off bad. We bought that building the day my brother got married, and I was at the wedding, and I got a call that one of the tenants drove their car into the building, and the force was so great that it pushed another tenant who was sleeping, like 6 feet forward in their bed. So it kind of started from there, and it just snowballed. On the night of the wedding. So one of my happiest moments is selling that building and getting another one. But
wasn't there another building where a car ran into the corner? Is that High Street?
Yes, that happened twice actually. A moving van. And took the whole decks off. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
So when looking at acquiring real estate, what is it that tells you, this is going to be a great investment or a property that, you mentioned you tend to lean towards more historic properties, but what else is there that kind of moves to the top of the list?
Well, obviously the numbers. I can't do a tenant any good if I can't make the numbers work, right? So, we have to be profitable to be able to keep making those improvements so tenants have what they need. So I'm always looking at, as you know, I don't go in to try to raise rents on a building, but I am looking to where that flexibility might be. So if a tenant leaves, what's the market rate for that space? So definitely the numbers, but I think also, is it a place where I would want to live or work? And for the most part, granted, if it's a multifamily, it might be when I was 20 would I live there, right? But I think that's an important thing, and to look at 22 Monument, for example, I could see myself working there and having a space. It's a beautiful building with the fixes we did. I think more than ever, it'd be great to have an office in there. So I think if I can see through even some of the problems, because that one had some issues. We walked that a couple times, and that was a tough one to envision, but we did it. So
definitely. So your last couple acquisitions have been commercial properties, so Newbury Street, Monument Square, the building on Pine Street. And you originally got started in multifamily. So that transition to commercial properties, was that intentional, and why, and has it been successful?
Yeah, it was intentional, and probably most had to do with age. Just as I'm getting older, I don't have the time to manage the multifamily properties as much. As you know, you almost have to be a full-time plumber to take care of everything, which was, you might laugh or look down, but I really enjoyed learning a lot of those things, and I know how to do those things. And when you fix something like a 100-year-old 6-inch sewer pipe, you feel pretty good after fixing it. but yeah, so I think just transitioning, and I like the multifamily, and I think with the strong market the multifamily has, part of me wanted to stay in that.
Yeah.
And I've always had pretty good tenants and even relationships with the residential tenants.
Right.
So I do miss that, and it was hard to sell some of those buildings, especially then see the rents go up a lot and some of them having to move out. But the commercial also offers a lot of opportunity, learning different businesses. I mean, there's so many great different businesses, like Kenotech, who just moved into 22 Monument, or Great Diamond Partners, all these people, you know, David's Restaurant, who, what was it, like 2 decades ago, took a gamble on Monument Square.
Yeah.
People said
It's
he was
a different
crazy.
place then, yeah.
And really made it work. So that's always really interesting to me, all these different businesses. So I've liked it. It's worked out. I don't know if the numbers are quite as good as multifamilies, but it's worked out pretty well.
So is that really what you see as the major difference between commercial investments and residential investments, is just the tenant relationships and the tenant demands?
Well, I think it all depends on where we're at a given time in a market, right? So I remember the multifamily market when, you know, we couldn't get somebody to show up for a showing,
right? And
now you get 40 people to show up at a showing. So I think there's a lot of different. I think the demand is higher on the multifamily right now. So
definitely.
So you're gonna, you know, you can get a place rented as long as it's in decent shape. Whereas the commercial takes longer. It's a longer cycle. So that took some getting used to for me, actually. You know, going from immediate demand and then, you know, having to wait it out and filter through different offers and how much, you know, do I want to put into fixing up a space?
Right.
So how much is the tenant going to put in? So I think that's a little different for me. I don't know if I'm really answering.
No, definitely, definitely. So when Boulos didn't rent all of 22 Monument in the first week, you were wondering what was going on.
It does, like, you like a full building, right? And
of course.
now I'm settling down about it a little bit.
But,
and you really want the right tenant, which is important too. So,
you've touched on this a little bit earlier, in terms of really what are your core beliefs when, you know, owning and operating real estate? I know you talked about in terms of trying to keep rents fair and low, building relationships. Is there anything else to kind of touch on in terms of really what?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we touched on most of it, but I would go back to treating the tenants as your customer. It doesn't mean you let a tenant walk over you, but you got to give them a fair price for the space and make sure the services are there they need. For example, in the time of COVID, which I bet you're probably going to ask about, we have a number of therapist tenants who have gone to the Zoom. So that involved, you know, whereas before we weren't going to pay for their Wi-Fi, now we've said, okay, let us upgrade that for you so you can have the right connection speed to operate from your office doing these Zoom consultations. I had some good restaurant tenants, I don't know if you want me to name them or not, but where we went to them to offer rent credits, because our ultimate goal is, for the most part, we want all these tenants to stay. Right. And so how do we get them to be able to stay? So far, these restaurant tenants have refused help. Wow. I know. So that's amazing. Right. So I felt I needed to up my loyalty game to them. So you know, gift cards and things like that. So you know, I would go online and buy $500 or $1,000 a gift card and give them away to other tenants, because it's a tough time for everybody. Definitely. Right? Well, your relationship with those tenants probably paid off in times like this, in terms of, I hope so, you know, people being honest with you, and and they have a lot of questions right now, because they want to feel safe, and you know, are you putting in UV light and things, you know, even the things that don't make a lot of sense, you know, but you got to talk them through that. Right. So I mean, now that we've touched on COVID and the pandemic, you know, obviously we've been in a very strong market in the greater Portland area for the past 10 years or more. I think we were all sensing maybe there'd be a slight downturn on the horizon. This came very quick and sudden, caught all of us by surprise. What do you think are the short-term and long-term effects right now with, you know, your commercial holdings and residential buildings? Yeah, I wish I had next spring's Wall Street Journal or something like that, so we could know. But I think we are going to face some softening for sure.
Yep.
And maybe that was coming anyway, so maybe it'll be more drastic. But between the debt that's piling up and how that might eventually affect things,
right?
So will it be 2-3 months from now, or will it be 2 years from now? I don't know, but I would imagine we can't escape some sort of softening in the market. So my strategy is, how do I remain competitive in that market? I think we're doing a pretty good job right now of, offering really nice Class B space at hopefully a fair market, maybe below market. Certainly existing tenants are below market.
Right.
We chose to forego any rent increases this year, for example.
Yeah.
I do think, though, not to be all negative, because I do think Maine does offer something unique even in a crisis like this. It seems like more people are looking at a place like Maine and saying, "No, maybe I want to be in a place like that." I was in getting my sailboat registered today, and the women there were saying how they're getting more and more New York people buying up here. And so I think we might see more of that. I don't know how that'll affect the commercial market, but if the right people come up, they might want to start a business. They might be looking for space.
Yep.
So yeah, I don't think we'll escape it unscathed, but I feel pretty good about being in Portland and being in Maine. We also have seen, typically we look at the government as putting up roadblocks to what we want to accomplish, but I think they've been pretty good, both on the Portland side and on the state side.
Yep.
And just 2 examples, how quickly Portland city government responded to wet restaurants and setting up all these outdoor dining zones and shutting streets really quick. And then this is now several months old, but David Turin, who had all this keg beer left when they shut down, and it was going to go bad. So he said, what can I do? And within 24 hours, the governor approved all restaurants selling out their keg beer to go. So so that's kind of like, maybe other states work that quickly, but it's nice to see some help to businesses during a time like this and doing it really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, definitely took a lot of creativity and working together, and it seemed Portland's done a pretty good job. What do you see as Portland's greatest strengths, or Maine's greatest strengths, maybe separate from the pandemic? What do you think drives people to this area?
I think the natural beauty, for sure. So, I mean, that's what brought me here. I mean, just there's so much natural beauty, whether it's right off the coast of Portland or Penobscot Bay, or even going up more down east. And I think Portland, again, somewhere where developers and others are on different sides, but I think maintaining the historic housing stock has been important. Right. I've more recent, not initially, but more recently, been much more supportive of that, because I think it does help our property values. We maintain the aesthetics of our buildings. It doesn't mean we don't build new, modern-looking buildings. It just means when we do that, the architects pay attention to what's surrounding them, and I think Portland's done a good job, I think, with that. Yeah.
Are you concerned at all with the rising rents in downtown Portland?
I am. I'm glad you brought that up, and I think we have to be careful about that, because we don't want to price ourselves out of what we have going on, especially on the residential side. If we lose the young people, the line cooks, the artists, I don't think we need to build specific housing for them. Sometimes I think that gets a little convoluted and never works right. But if they can't afford to live here, some of that vibrancy will leave the city, and I think that's a really important factor to making Portland an attractive place.
Right. Definitely.
I'm not one of those young, vibrant people necessarily anymore, but I really think it's necessary. So if a line cook cannot afford to live in Portland, that's a problem. If somebody starting out a small little business can't afford to rent a space in Portland or a studio, I think that's a problem. So It doesn't mean we don't need luxury apartments too. We definitely do, but somehow
It's
we have
that
to
balance.
maintain. Yeah, I think it's a balance for sure.
Yeah. You wonder if maybe COVID or the pandemic will help settle that a little bit.
Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned you didn't have any rent increases this year. I think I've heard that from a few other landlords. So I don't know, maybe that will be interesting to look at in a year.
It will, and what will, if next spring things are back to some normalcy and the restaurants are full again, maybe everything's okay, but could this reprice the per square foot lease rate for restaurants, for example? I don't think we know those answers yet, but it might.
We'll look back in this interview in 3 years.
Right, and see.
Yeah.
So I think that's, unfortunately, I don't see it yet affecting the residential market, the multifamily market. Those rents
seem still pretty strong.
Yeah, it seems still pretty strong. I mean, I get a call a week. As you know, I don't have a lot of apartments, so I don't have a lot to rent, but I get a call every week from a friend or somebody who knows somebody asking if we have anything, and we don't. I mean, we've had the same tenants for quite some time. So,
are there any buildings that you kind of got away that you had an opportunity that you wish you had purchased?
How many? We have so many of those stories, right?
Yeah.
The one that sticks out the most because of the rise of the East End in the last few years is, I think this would have been 94, maybe 95, and I looked at an 8-unit on the Prom with water views and needed work, and I said it was too expensive. I don't know if it was listed at like $285 or something.
For an 8-unit?
Yeah,
which is now like $2.5 million.
That one definitely got away, and there's definitely been a few others. I mean, I feel lucky that even when I was buying some properties in the early to mid 90s, that people were telling me I was overpaying, so I was nervous about it at the time. But that's what those were the options if I wanted to get into the market. So I feel at least I did bite the bullet on some properties.
Especially if you have a long outlook, a 20-year outlook on a property. You can expect appreciation.
Right. And I think even more recent purchases, like the Temple building.
On Newbury Street.
Yeah, I was worried that I was overpaying for that at the time.
I remember that. Yeah.
Right? I was nervous about that, and so it worked out.
Yeah.
But,
definitely. I think you got a good deal on that one as well. So looking into your crystal ball for the next 10 years, what do you see happening to commercial real estate here in Maine and Portland in particular?
Yeah, that's there's so many factors, right?
Especially now,
Yeah, but even outside of COVID, we've talked about a little bit already. I think Maine and Portland present a desirable place people want to be, right? For some of the factors we talked about, it's a beautiful, scenic place. It has good schools, low crime rates, a good healthcare system. I think reasonable government, somewhat independent government. So I think we have a lot of things going for us that'll keep the commercial market relatively strong. Outside of these ups and downs. The big question I always worry about are the macro things that are out of our control here in Maine, such as a huge national debt, even a looming global debt crisis. So will that do something eventually to interest rates that it seems to have escaped so far? And would we see return to double-digit interest rates or something like that? So, that's the part that I don't know enough about to predict, but my crystal ball right now includes deleveraging a little bit. So I don't know if that'll be the right strategy, especially considering interest rates are so low right now.
Right.
But I'd rather be a little bit ready to take advantage if there are some opportunities presented in a few years.
Well, that was one of the questions that I was going to ask earlier is, are you looking to add more properties to your portfolio or reduce your portfolio?
Yeah, I think I'm still interested in consolidating. So there are some properties that I would be ready to unload, like we've talked about, and then move into to something else that more fits my needs right now, like 22 Monument, like Newbury Street, things like that. Things that make more sense for if and when I retire for a management company to handle. Because I think there's certain properties that are tough for a management company to handle well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, Bill, this has been great speaking with you, and thank you so much for joining us
for
on the
having me.
Boulos Beat. And thank you for joining us at home as well. If you'd like to know more about the Boulos Company, please visit our webpage, www.boulos.com. You can also find us, the Boulos Company, on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. So, see you later.